action.
Hello, boys and girls. This is the course of Environmental Science, which is meant for BTech third year and fifth semester. The code for this particular subject is AMC 501. As you know, this is the mandatory course of BTech third year, and I am G. Chakraborty from Department of Chemistry, welcoming you to this course of Environmental Science.
Now, you people have already come across 3 lectures in this particular course, and you people have seen that the first lecture contains the details of the resources, what are resources, what different type of resources are, and how we are going to deal with these resources, how we are going to protect these resources, right? And what are the goods, what are the bads, what should be followed, what should not be done. Everything we have discussed in our previous lecture, first lecture, right? And in the second lecture we have briefly discussed about population, how population growth can be estimated, how it can be controlled, and this sort of things we have discussed. And in the third lecture we people have seen what environmental disasters are, what type of disasters can be there, how the disasters can be controlled from the individual point of view and from the government point of view. Now finally it's time for the fourth lecture, and this lecture is going to be very interesting. As you people can already see that the lecture name is ecology and ecosystem, right? So this is one of the basic parts of the environmental science that we people will be dealing with, and it will be very important for us, and it is very informative also, because without this information we cannot sustain our life. Now little information about this lecture you people are already having from your previous knowledge of geography and biological science that you people have studied in your school, right? Now in this lecture what basically we will do, we will see what ecosystem is, what are the types of ecosystem, how ecosystem has been formed, okay, what are biotic and abiotic components, what are terrestrial ecosystem, what are aquatic ecosystem, and followed by we have 5 different ecosystems that we need to study actually, right? And in this particular lecture we'll be studying 2 of those 5 ecosystems, that is the grassland ecosystem and the forest ecosystem, okay? So without losing any time, let us move into the lecture and have a blast with the topic ecosystem, right? So let's go. Now ecosystem, what the definition says, if we move to the definition of the word ecosystem, we will see that ecosystem is nothing but a combination of an area, right, of an area that contains biotic as well as abiotic factor. Question arises, what biotic factors are, what abiotic factors are. So we will discuss about it. The ecosystem can also be visualized as a functional unit of nature, that is, it can be considered as a small part of nature where the biotic or the living organisms interact with the abiotic or the dead or not so dead non-living things, as well as they interact with other biotic organisms, right? For example, say whenever I used to teach this in the class in front of students, I always say that you and I are talking, that is, this biotic is interacting with biotic because we both are living, right? As well as say I am writing something on the board with a pen and you are writing something in your copy. So your copy, pen, board, everything are abiotic. So biotic is interacting with abiotic as well as biotic is interacting with biotic. So this is what ecosystem is, right? Now as you can see, it is written that abiotic feature contains air, water, rainfall, temperature, soil, rocks and humidity, whereas the biotic features contains anything and everything that is living, right? So living beings are basically contained in the biotic factors, okay? Now these biotic factors can be further divided into several groups, right? That is producer and consumer, okay? Now this producer and consumers, producers have no division because producers are nothing but the green plants, but the these consumers are again subdivided into 3-4 categories, right? Primary consumers, secondary consumer, tertiary consumers, okay? Now we can also say this as autotrophs and heterotrophs. Autotrophs are those which make their own food, and there are 2 types of autotrophs basically. One is photoautotrophs, which uses light to make their own food, and another is chemoautotrophs, which use redox reactions to make their own food. Now photoautotrophs will be definitely green plants, and chemoautotrophs will be the bacteria like your sulfur bacteria or Begiotua and like this, right? Okay, now after autotrophs we have heterotrophs. The heterotrophs are nothing but the consumers. Now these consumers can be of two types basically. One is primary, secondary, tertiary consumer, and another is the decomposer. Okay, now primary, secondary, tertiary consumer, what the thing lies, you people have already studied. This is nothing but the ecological pyramid. Primary consumers are those which feed directly on the producers, that means cow, goat which feeds, or grasshopper which feed directly on the green plants or grasses, right? Now this grasshopper is eaten by frog, so frog will be secondary consumer. Then this frog will be eaten by a snake, so snake will be tertiary consumer, right? Okay, so this is primary, secondary and tertiary consumer. There is nothing but the food chain. And after this we are having decomposers. So decomposers are basically different types of bacteria and fungi which feeds on the dead and decaying microorganisms. Okay, dead and decaying organisms rather, right? They are microorganisms. Okay, right? So this was all about the biotic and abiotic factors, and this was all about the definition of ecosystem. Now ecosystems can be broadly divided into two parts. One is natural ecosystem, another is artificial ecosystem. See, this is on the basis of formation of ecosystem. There are other two divisions like terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem, that is on the depending on the nature of ecosystem, right? But based on formation, based on the nature of formation rather, ecosystems can be of two types. One is natural ecosystem, another is artificial ecosystem. Okay, now natural ecosystem is something which is built by nature. For example, if you see a forest, if you see a grassland, if you see a desert, it is built directly by nature. No humans have built it, right? So that ecosystems, those ecosystems are called natural ecosystems. Also, if we see a lake, a pond or river, that is also built by nature and is called natural ecosystem, right? What is artificial ecosystem? If we see into the fact, we will come across that artificial ecosystems are those which are basically created by humans. Okay, now this created by human means different types of townships and factories, right? Different shopping malls and complexes, and different other things like a zoo. Okay, that is also an artificial ecosystem. An aquarium is an artificial ecosystem also, right? Okay, so they're maintained basically by humans, and by the addition of energy and plant manipulations, the natural balance is disturbed. Okay, right? Humans try to maintain the natural balance, but gradually it gets disturbed because nature is nature and humans are humans. Okay, humans are itself created by nature, right? So basically these are the two main divisions, that is natural ecosystem and artificial ecosystem. Now after this we people be seeing that natural ecosystem basically on the depending on the nature. Okay, depending on their nature, natural ecosystem is basically divided into two parts. One is aquatic ecosystem, another is terrestrial ecosystem, as you people have already seen, right? One is terrestrial, another is aquatic. Inside terrestrial we may have forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystem, desert ecosystem, okay, and mangrove ecosystems are there, right? And whereas in aquatic ecosystem we have freshwater ecosystem and marine ecosystem, right? Now inside freshwater, rivers, lakes, ponds, everything will come up. Okay, so this is nothing but the natural ecosystem, right? Now ecosystem, as we have already discussed, that biotic and abiotic factors belong to the ecosystem, so that thing we also need to consider, right? Now we will move to some very very important terms, right? Just like the different types of ecosystem we'll study here in our class. But before that, we need to know one thing very important about the ecosystem. Whenever we are discussing about any ecosystem, what we need to do, first of all, we need to see that what different types of biotic and abiotic components are present in that particular ecosystem, right? So basically whenever we are describing any ecosystem, we are going to describe the biotic and abiotic components that are present in that ecosystem, because without that nothing is present. Okay, so we need to find it out that what biotic and abiotic components are present here, right? So with this objective, let us move towards the grassland ecosystem, right? Now what grassland ecosystem says? whenever we are trying to describe the grassland ecosystem, we'll see that 21% of the total land area of earth, right, that is covered by the grassland. Okay, 21% of the total land area is covered by grassland. It includes all the grasslands starting from savanna, okay, to the grassland present in your locality also. Everything is contained in this particular 21% of the total land area, right? Now, what type of abiotic components can we find inside this grassland? You will see the abiotic are basically the physical components. If we go for the segregation, if we go for the classification of these abiotic components, we'll see that it may be classified into physical, organic and inorganic factors. Okay, so abiotic components are further classified into physical, organic and inorganic factors. Now this physical factor means nothing but sunlight, air, water, wind, etc., etc. Now organic factor means proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins, fats from the plants and animals that are present in the ecosystem. And last but not least, the inorganic factor contains all the metal salts, for example sodium, potassium, cobalt, iron, magnesium, whatever is present inside the plants and animals that are present in an ecosystem, right? That will constitute the organic components, inorganic components. Okay, so for grassland ecosystem, the basic abiotic components are these only, whatever we people have discussed here. Now if we move to the biotic components, we will see that the biotic components are basically divided into three parts, right? And these three parts are nothing but producers, consumers and decomposers. Okay, now what producers are, what consumers are and what decomposers are, that we people will discuss. Now if we move into the discussion of the producers, then what type of producers are basically found in grassland? See, grassland contains those particular organisms which are feeding directly on the grass. For example, we can see that here herbaceous plants like grasses, herbs and shrubs are the predominant producers of the grassland. See, whenever we are studying grassland, we cannot say that a huge number of plants and trees and big trees are present in the grassland. No, we cannot say. Grassland is basically supposed to have grasses, herbs and shrubs. So these are the main producers that are present inside a grassland, right? Now after the producers, let us move to the consumers, and the first category of consumers will be the primary consumers. Now these primary consumers will be insects and termites and grasshopper, etc., which feeds directly on these grasses. Okay, also they will contain the grazing elements like cattle, sheep, goat, etc., who grazes on this particular grasses, who feeds on this particular grasses, herbs and shrubs, right? So they will constitute the primary consumers together. Okay, now if we move to the secondary consumers, see, these are basically the carnivores, right? These are basically carnivores that feeds on the herbivores. Okay, now carnivores means animals which feeds on flesh. Now what type of flesh? See, grasshopper, which is eating the grass and which is a primary consumer, will be eaten by the frog, as we people have already discussed, right? Now this frog will become a carnivore in that sense, okay, or a secondary consumer in that sense. Similarly, lizard will feed on insects and it will also act as secondary consumer. Small wolves will also act as secondary consumers, which can feed on this sheep and cattle and goat, right? Okay, now after secondary, let us move to the tertiary consumers. These are actually top carnivores, right? Top carnivore means these feed on carnivores directly. This feeds on the secondary consumers. For example, see, hyena eats snakes and frogs and lizards and all, right? And peacock is supposed to eat lizard and all, right? Then crow eats everything. Then fox is there, hawk is there. These animals are basically consisting of the tertiary consumers. Okay, they are the tertiary consumers. And last but not least, we are having the decomposers. Now we need to see what these decomposers are. So decomposers are basically the bacteria, fungi and protozoa and other microbes which are present in soil, and these organisms are supposed to feed on the dead and decaying organic matter. That's why they are called decomposers, because they are supposed to decompose everything. Okay, decompose the flesh, bones and everything present inside the dead and dead organic animals, right? Dead organic matter, maybe plants, maybe animals. Okay, right? So basically, as we have seen that in the grassland ecosystem, we need to check out what the abiotic components are. Then we need to see what the biotic components are. Now these biotic components contains producers, consumers, and consumers are further divided into primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. Okay, now what is contained inside each of these headings, that we people have clearly mentioned here. Okay, right? And then comes the decomposers. So decomposers are basically the microorganisms which feed on these producers and primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers, right? So this was all about the grassland ecosystem. Okay, next we are having the forest ecosystem, right? Now what is the meaning of forest? If we go into the fact that what does forest means, now forest means places where we are expecting large number of trees and huge amount of greenery, right? Now 40% of the total land area of the earth crust is covered by forest. 40%, right? 40% of the total land is covered by forest. And can you tell me how many types of forest are there? You people have studied in class 9 level geography, right? How many types of forest are there? Basically I need to discuss this before we move into the details of the forest ecosystem. See, there are total 5 type of forest. Okay, can you remember these 5 types of forest? Number 1 is tropical rain forest. Okay, tropical rain forest is number 1. Number 2 is deciduous forest, right? Okay, can you remember the others? Number 3 is coniferous forest, right? First one is tropical rain forest, second one is deciduous forest, third one is coniferous forest, and fourth one is nothing but evergreen forest, right? First one is tropical rain forest, second one is deciduous, third one is coniferous, fourth one is evergreen forest, and fifth one is our very own mangrove forest. Why I am saying very own? Because they are present here in West Bengal only, right, in the Sundarbans. Okay, so these 5 types of forest are there: tropical rain forest, deciduous forest, mangrove forest, evergreen forest, and coniferous forest. These 5 different types of forest are there. Now we need to see what type of abiotic substances or abiotic components are basically present inside a forest. Okay, now what these abiotic components are? As we already know that abiotic component means the components which do not have a life, which are basically non-living things, right? This we people already know. Okay, now this particular abiotic components is further subdivided into 3 categories, that also we know. One is physical, another is inorganic, and third one is organic, right? Now physical component contains temperature, light, air, humidity, wind, etc, etc. Okay, we are not saying directly sunlight here, because there are that much dense forest where sunlight is not supposed to enter. I mean to say sunlight will not touch the ground, right? It will be shredded, it will be shielded by the forest. Okay, so these are the physical components. Next we have the inorganic components. An inorganic component means CO2, water, O2, N2, and salts of calcium and magnesium. So already I have spoken you about that all the metal type of things, metals and non-metals constitute of the inorganic components, and that is also mentioned here, right? And next comes the organic components. Now organic components denotes whatever different types of biomolecules present in the different species that lives in the forest, right? So carbohydrate, protein, lipid are found in the this body of this organisms, right? Okay, next let us move to the biotic components. Now as we know, biotic component means living things. So whenever we are moving into producers, we have large number of green plants and herbs, shrubs and grasses and everything, small, big, different types of plants are present, and all these are producers, right? Now they will be eaten by the consumers, that is the primary consumers, which includes the small animals like ants, flies, beetles, bugs and spiders, whereas the larger animals are also present and they also belong to primary consumers like elephant, nilgai, deer, mole, squirrel, screw, flying fox, bat, etc., etc. Okay, they also will contribute towards the primary consumer because they feed on the green plants present in the forest, right? Next there comes the secondary consumers. Now secondary consumers are supposed to feed on the primary consumers, and as we people can see, examples are given of snakes, birds, lizards and foxes, which basically feeds on the herbivores that are supposed to eat this particular primary consumers. Okay, now do not expect that every secondary consumer may eat any of this primary consumer. No, none of the snakes and birds are capable of eating the elephants. Okay, so it's not like that, but we need to see which animal is eating whom, right? Okay, next come the tertiary consumers. Now tertiary consumers, I have already discussed with you people that they are the top carnivores, and they include lion, tigers, etc., etc., which can prey on the herbivores as well as on carnivores, right? Now lion can eat both a nilgai, a cattle, as well as a fox, right? So it depends what the lion will eat, right? But it can eat both. It can feed both on secondary consumer as well as primary consumer. Okay, and as we people will move for the decomposers, we will see that the main decomposers of the forest are bacteria and different types of fungus and protozoa. Okay, and they are supposed to feed on this dead and decaying animals, right? Okay, so basically this was about these two different type of ecosystems. In the next lecture we'll be seeing three more ecosystems, right? And details about those ecosystems will be discussed in the next lecture. Also we'll be seeing what is food chain and what is food web. Okay, so let us summarize today's lecture. So in today's lecture we people have seen that this was the first lecture basically of ecology, and the fourth lecture of this general part. So what is ecosystem we people have discussed, and what are the biotic and what are the abiotic components, that also we people have been discussing here. And after that we have seen that ecosystems are basically are of two types. One is natural and artificial, depending on formation, and depending on nature ecosystems are again of two types. One is terrestrial, another is aquatic, right? Now aquatic means ecosystem on water, and terrestrial means ecosystem on land. Okay, so in this lecture we have studied two different ecosystems that lives on land. One is the grassland ecosystem, another is the forest ecosystem, right? And we have come across that 21% grassland exists in earth, whereas 40% of forest exist in earth, right? And in each of this ecosystem we have seen what the abiotic components are, and what the living and non-living things are, and how many different type of producers are there, how many different type of consumers are there, and what decomposers are present in this particular ecosystems, right? Okay, so this was all about the lecture 4 of the general part of the mandatory course on environmental science, that is MC 301. See you in the next lecture. Till then, you stay safe and be happy and work something for the environment. Thank you.